We could take a few more questions now that I've prompted. I'm looking at Father Halleck, who said actually earlier, you know, we don't take to indoctrination. Pope Francis said it. Authoritarianism, people get tired of it. Francis has told us. So, please, your questions. We'll take a bank of questions first, and we'll then come back to the speakers. Perhaps you might identify yourselves and the person to whom the question is addressed.
Pavel Bargar. My question goes to both, actually, speakers. It will be on authenticity, which was the original topic of Professor Charles Taylor's lecture, and which was also the topic that Professor Desmond commented on and interpreted it very helpfully, I think, as fidelity. My question is, how do we pursue authentic spirituality and faith, or if we want to say faithful spirituality that is oriented toward the other, in a globalized age, which is also the age of internet, of the mass media, of social networks, which are phenomena that in serious ways discourage authenticity in a sense of fidelity. So how do we pursue authenticity in this context? Thank you.
Thank you. Just behind there again. Thank you.
This question is for Professor Taylor. You may be familiar with the question of reasonable accommodation. I'm from Montreal, so a reasonable accommodation whereby a determined society faces the challenges of welcoming newcomers, immigrants, who bring with them traditions and cultural baggage which could be very different, maybe even contradictory to that society. My question is this: the Church in the secular age, would you agree that she faces a similar challenge in welcoming and inviting people from all different sorts of horizons with different philosophical, ideological, cultural baggage to be part of the Church? And if so, if she does face this challenge, what would be perhaps a way to deal with that, to face that challenge? Thank you.
Thank you. My question is for Professor Taylor. We're living in a time of growing spiritualities. They are not Catholic or even Christians. I would like to know if there is any possibility to know if those spiritualities are good or bad for humanity. I mean, if you can see if they are trying to make you more human or less human, and also if they are able to crack in some way the buffer self and to grow, to enhance a porous self, which is open to other people and which is also open to God.
I'd like to address some of your comments regarding Christendom, specifically the missionary activity of Christendom. I come from Asia, and studies in Christianity in Asia originally, earlier after Vatican II, the debate was whether we are going to be an Asian church or simply a church in Asia, a church of Asia, and so on. But now the discussion is whether one can speak of Asian Christianity or Asian Christianities. In other words, that there are different forms of Christianity in Asia. And I bring this up precisely because of the point that you made, that perhaps in the modern Western world, in a post-secular age, that there will be different forms of being Christian. Would they be the same or dynamics or similar? Would they be based on the same nature of what mission is and what Christianity is all about, or even religion? Thank you.
Thank you.
So authentic, and the thing is, it means, it had two different meanings in the question. I mean, the original idea of authenticity that I was trying to work with was the idea that each human being has their own way of being human, their own vocation, and they should find it and not take it, imitate someone else. But when you say authentic Christian, you mean real Christian. You don't mean, see, the word authentic used along with another. So they don't believe in gestures. I thought, this is Rome. I thought this, anyway. There's an authentic X means a real X, an authentic, authentic Christian and so on. So it's different. The question, as it were, slid from one issue to the other. But I think there's an important issue arising there, which is that, as I tried to explain in one of the works about this, that the ethic of authenticity is like any ethic arising in history. It can be lived out in an extremely oversimple, bowdlerized form, or it can be lived out in a very deep, authentic, in this sense, in the second sense of the word, form. I mean, really living to that ethic. And the forms that are very trivial and superficial are forms which think that I have to draw just out of myself, right? Just without reference to anything else, draw out of myself what belongs to me. Whereas the form that makes sense given the human condition, that is given the condition that we only ever develop our identity in dialogue with others and with our parents to begin with and other people around us later on. It's always a relationship, right? So my identity, if I recognize what it really is all about, involves essentially other people. I mean, the median concept of the significant other is an example of a term that makes sense in the concept of authenticity and which directly relates me to another person as part of my identity, right? So the thing is that you can't judge an ethic by its more degraded forms. I mean, you wouldn't judge the ethic of holiness by, people who are sort of setting themselves up as phony prophets and collecting money. Well, you wouldn't say that that was authentic, real holiness, and you wouldn't, as it were, judge the inadequacy of the ethic of holiness by its more degraded forms. And I think that's what a lot of people do. I mean, they think that you're simply saying you draw it all out of yourself, it has nothing to do with your relations, and that is such a nonsense when you think of what the human condition is. If I can just recur to the notion of buffer. Can I do this for a minute?
Yes, because that was one of the questions.
Because that was not a question, but also is raised by William. That, just a footnote here, but I think we're not in disagreement. I just used the term in one context, which was the relationship to the enchanted world and spirits. But I mean, it's quite legitimate to say, let's look at it in a broader context. And I think when you look at it in a broader context, we're in a situation where we're fighting against buffering. I mean, if you are brought up to see the world around you in a completely instrumental way, right, you aren't open to what you get if you read Keats and you read, and you read Wordsworth and so on. But I also think you're absolutely right. The porosity comes first because we only learn language, we're taught language by our caregivers or whoever, and it has to be in some kind of relation of love. Otherwise, as you know, children really, in orphanages, they can almost literally wither away, right? So not only do I only get my identity out of this relation of communion, I only get my language, right? Then afterwards I can very often innovate, right? That very often happens. But first comes our language, and only then comes my language. Okay, so reasonable accommodation. Well, is that the model? I mean, certainly we need to have a church which is going to be able to bring together people who are very different in exactly the sense I was trying to describe. That is, their itinerary, their way of coming to God, coming to Christ, coming to the church, is very different, right? And some people are, for instance, deeply moved by the Latin Mass, deeply moved by the liturgical tradition. I confess I am too. And that's the really important portal that they go through. And other people are the ones, like the ones I was describing, are looking for a way of releasing a certain generosity in themselves, and they're trying to find a way of living that. Very different, very different modes of approach. The Catholic Church, if it's really going to be Catholic, has to be able to bring together, include all these different modes of approach. That's why I say the big question is, how do we, who are very different ones and are looking down on each other, how do we live together? But the Asian churches, I think this is something very interesting, because in many cases of Asian churches, the question of Christendom never has arisen. And it doesn't make sense in India. It's not, you're not living in a society which is, as it were, from the apex down, informed by Christianity, and it probably never will be like that. In the case of the Philippines, you have something like a colonial Christendom that was established. But in any other Asian context that I can think of, and maybe not East Timor, but in China, in Korea, so on, you have, in Taiwan, etc., you have Christian churches that are very plainly part of a very large mosaic of great difference and so on. Did you want to come, if the president will allow you?
Did you want to respond? You wanted to say something back? Okay.
The whole point precisely is that even in...
Can you just wait till we get a microphone to you, please, so everybody can listen in and be part of it? Thank you.
First, my point is, even from the point of view of the European missionaries, they wanted to transplant the church or Christianity, but Christianity, even in those minority countries, took on a form that is different. And that's my point there, that it's been different. And therefore, in a sense, this is perhaps an example of the new forms of Christianity in a post-secular age that will come.
Thank you. Have you something you want to add, William?
I was asked also about authenticity, so I express my right to say something about it. My hesitation was to do with the fact that I do think that words carry a heritage of meaning in them, and much of the time we don't pay attention to words. So the word authentic carries a history of certain notions, and it could be the case that lexically it takes on a certain significance in our day today due to, again, historical developments. I mentioned the aesthetic case. So you have connoisseurs that authenticate genuine works of art, and the process of authentication is saying this is a Rembrandt. And of course, we find sometimes that works that were called from the school later being authenticated in that sense. But you see the very close and intimate connection between a singular hand and a work. So I think that authenticity is very much bound up with singularity in that sense. And when I was suggesting that a word fidelity is perhaps something to be considered, it was trying to bring in the intimate implication of being in relation to the other. So in other words, being true to oneself, which I think is one of the meanings that authenticity does now carry, is inseparable from being in relation to the other. In the background also, I was reacting against authenticity as a notion that you find among the existentialists back in the 40s and the 50s. And that also is highly accented in relation to the singular individual. And if you go back to a theme that is very present in Professor Taylor's work, namely the expressivist aesthetic of romanticism into the 19th century, into the 20th century also. So that sense of authenticity is very much involved with this exploration of deep subjectivity, so to say. I'm not objecting to that at all, but I think the problematic place of our relation to the other can sometimes be recessed in certain forms of language, and that was the source of my query.
Yes, so we have a question here, we have one here, and we have one here. We have three just in a diagonal, and then we'll move to this side of the room for the others. You didn't get your hands up quick enough on the right-hand side.
It's more a comment than a question. I was struck listening to the three of you by the way you presented your positions almost as polar opposites. First, we should be careful about making too strong a comparison between the old confessionalism based on conscription and the new voluntary adult Christianity. I mean, we are here at the Gregorian. We've heard about Ignatian spirituality. Ignatian spirituality is based on a notion of born-again adults. It's not a notion of infant baptism. And this was the age of confessionalism. Even the very confessions were very much part of a very missionizing evangelization, not based on infant conscription. So we must be careful about constructing a kind of an old Christendom versus our own autonomous, liberating individuals. And the daddy in me finds very, very strange this notion that informing my children with values is a form of forcing a legal conscription on them. I mean, I don't see how else can you educate children but informing them with values. Of course, they will grow up and they will reject these values if they want. But the notion of these autonomous children that cannot be informed by any kind of indoctrination, I find very, very problematic. And it goes to the notion of these porous versus precisely buffer selves. I mean, we must be careful constructing these dichotomies of autonomous modernity and heteronomous tradition. We must be very, very careful.
Thank you.
This is a comment and a question bearing on the question of porosity. And it seems to me, and I'm hoping I'm consistent with the response that Charles gave in terms of where in his account porosity functions. In that initial relationality, I also think it functions in terms of your concern for human solidarity. And for me, perhaps the most significant case is in terms of your concern for human vulnerability. And it would, in a sense, what I particularly with any one of those, I'm wondering if there's a change of inflection, which I hope would be a positive change of inflection, if one talked about solidarity, relationality, vulnerability, if one put the modifier kenotic in front of any or all of those three indications of our immersion in a porosity.
Thank you.
Thank you, so-called Prague. I would like to thank you for bringing in a topic which is, I think, very important, namely educating children. We, all of us, in connection with the term of authenticity, because a child cannot be authentic. It has to be educated to a sort of authenticity. And only then can it perhaps make contracts. Baptism is not a contract, it is a gift or in theological terms, a grace. It's only there is a contract of the parents with the church to educate the child in Christian faith. So you are never, the child is not bound by any contract as being baptized. Yes, this is, you are bound to educate them. I think this is typical that we think about humans as ready-made adult persons. But a good part of our life, we are children. We are educated, and we need somebody to lead us to our authenticity. And this is something completely different than indoctrination. Yes. This is a help to become oneself. And oneself, grown-up oneself knows that he doesn't remain the same. It is not authenticity, doesn't mean to be always the same. So I think there the topic of education and of children is of extreme importance for the future of the church. Thank you for this.
We're just going to take that bank of questions and then we'll revert. But maybe we might take some from this side and then we'll go to you. Yes.
So what should we, yes. Yeah, sorry, a question that Phil Rossi asked. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that I'm going to use this word porous, buffered in a very broad sense that William introduced, not the sense of the book. Yeah. The porosity is primary, I think for the reason mentioned there, that we're first given our language, given our identity, and so on. But then, when you grow up, you become capable of branching off. And what I consider the best education is education by parents that are really concerned, well, what is this kid going to really want to do? What are the affinities this kid seems to be revealing? Let's give him or her this kind of training and so on. So you can have the kind of education that helps people to find themselves, I think, as the gentleman said there. I think that's the way the relationship really works. Porosity is there originally. Now, in that way, what you can lose, that's really very sad, and become buffered in that sense, what you can lose is go back to what I was saying earlier about my own take on the dimension of kenosis that I was talking about in the talk. What you can lose is the ability really to see people that you meet, what's going on there, right? You can kind of desensitize yourself, or you can be we all are so preoccupied with your own, you're classing people in terms of, what you think is good or bad and so on, and you can't listen to them anymore. So what we very often have to do in our civic culture is relearn to listen. For instance, listening is one of the really great thing about being a teacher, actually, is when you start to direct people's theses, you have to listen. And first of all, you don't understand so what they're trying to get at. So you have to go back and forth, and you kind of learn to listen. And that is relearned porosity that we have to somehow struggle to get in our situation. Yeah, I entirely agree with what the gentleman said back there. Yeah.
Is there anything to add to that, William?
Well, first of all, it certainly wasn't my intention to set up dualisms between autonomy and heteronomy. It's a question of thinking the richness and intricacy of freedom and freedoms. And I didn't think really that the intention of the other speakers was there were doublenesses at stake, but doubles are very equivocal and have to be handled with finesse. Doubles are not dualism simply. So I think that part of our task as philosophers and thinkers are to develop the esprit de finesse, as Pascal puts it, in relation to tradition and modernity also, and in relation to the meaning of freedom. So I think that what has been said here about porosity, I agree very much with. On the question of infant baptism, I think it's a very delicate issue in the sense that not only a church accepting an initiate at the earliest possible moment, it's not the choice of the child in that sense, but But it's a welcome into a community, and hence something is given from others, from the other. The notion of grace was used in the remarks that were here. So I think we have to take that very seriously as something that is not, it may not be compatible with certain ideas of fully developed autonomous choice, but again, that may not be, there may be freedoms of being released into a community that are appropriate to the earlier stages of life, that are different than when a person matures and chooses for themselves. But there can be deep value, I think, in being offered something by a community in that larger religious sense, but also by parents themselves. Parents are, if they're good parents, they'll inevitably say, I want to pass on values that I consider of ultimate moment to my children. Again, you might consider the value of allowing the child later to choose for themselves as one of those ultimate values. But I think it's just part of the human condition that if you're a parent and caring for your children, you will want them to inherit, in some sense, the values that you consider most fundamental.
Yes, and perhaps if I could add to that, just so that there is no misunderstanding, I have no problem, and in taking on as a parent, as many of us here are, the joy of handing on to your child what you think is valuable and will be valuable, the joy of giving them access to grace, to sacramental grace, the strengthening that comes from that. But here's the difference. The problem is, in fact, I think that we've heard that our children are not entered into a lifelong contract. That's actually untrue. If, canonically at baptism, if they're baptized in the Catholic Church, they are members from that moment on of the Catholic Church. That's what we also confer. We can't run away from that reality, though many people are walking away from that reality. We've heard over years the expression semel Catholicus, semper Catholicus. When we talk about those who leave, we talk about them almost in terms like you might about somebody who's left the military and gone AWOL. It's kind of like, get back here. What are you doing out there? You're not living up to your rights, not up to the obligations of membership of the faith. And that's the question. It's not the raising of the small child. It's the raising into adulthood of the child, and how we move from them being and seeing themselves as conscripts to seeing themselves, like the catechumens do, as volunteers, as people who have taken on this wonderful sense of being loved by God, and who want themselves now to be witnesses in the world as volunteers, rather than kind of frustrated former conscripts. We've a lot of frustrated former conscripts around. Now, we'll go here. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I promised you, but I will go here first to take a few from here, and then we'll go back. Can we take this question there and that question over there, and then we'll come back to you. Okay.
Yeah. All right. And hi, Professor Taylor.
Just a little bit more loudly, please.
Okay.
I don't think people here can hear you well.
Thank you, Professor Taylor, for your talk today. And my question, that the conference has dealt a lot with, of course, the topic of renewing the church in a secular age. And I just want to focus a bit on how about renewing ourselves in the sense of as intellectuals, as thinkers. And to keep it very brief, how do you see the intellectual or the academia in a secular age? What do you see the task and the responsibilities of academics?
We have another question just over here on the right.
Yes, I'm a Franciscan teaching in Antonianum University. I have been reading and reviewing your work in the last years and following the discussions after secular age. And I have wondered always about the absence of Weberian issues concerning secularization. Max Weber issues concerning secularization in your analysis. My question is, do you think that economic factors, economic structure, the issues that Pippa Norris and Engelhardt show that have a high impact in secularization, like the well-functioning of welfare state, or the issue of the impact of science, and so the need to update faith to render it credible in a scientific culture, are less important or are secondary? Or do you think that we need to address all these challenges too? Thank you.
We have a question just here, the 1, 2, 3rd row. I beg your pardon, can I take this one first, if you don't mind? And then we've one at the back, and then I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Yes, I want to go a slightly different direction from the things we discussed up till now. I want to get back to your, I thought, very helpful analogy of Jesus as not so much telling people something, but seeing in a different way. So what you suggested was that his preaching was not so much telling people something, but looking at them that they could understand themselves in ways they could not imagine before. I mean, the way he saw them made it, and you said performative, it was a performative way of seeing them. And I think that could be, in a very profound way, being a model of the church. So then the question is not so much what do we pass on, but how do we look at the world and how do we look at people in such a way that they can do something which they could never think of before that they could be doing in a certain way. And then to get back to your to the parable of the mustard seed, then we are, I would argue, more the birds than the tree. So the idea of being part of the church is, I would say, not making the tree grow. I mean, the tree will grow anyway. We have to be the birds in a certain way, or we have to understand our world as a place where the birds can be.
Thank you. And we have one up here, just the very back. Thank you.
Question about the about the politics of the church in a secular age, and whether or not it's possible to still do a politics of the Catholic Church, and particularly politics of Catholic politicians in a secular age, and perhaps a Catholic Church or a set of Catholic politicians who accept everything that you've just described about a secular age, about the mustard seed, about authenticity, but who are still faced with the problem of mobilizing people, exercising power, things which seem on the face of it to be very non-canonic. Is it still possible to do those kinds of things in a distinctively Catholic way in a secular age? And here I'm thinking about the legacies of Christian democracy, and particularly Maritain, who does accept democracy, accepts pluralism, but still wants to build a new Christendom. So once that Christendom, if that Christendom is over, is that kind of form, or that sort of democratic form of Catholic politics, is that done as well? Thanks.
If you don't mind, I will take this question over here, and then I'll hand that bank of 5 questions to our speakers.
Professor Taylor, in a secular age, I'm here. You define a secular age as an age.
A little more loudly, please.
In a secular age, you define the secular age as an age which doesn't go beyond human flourishing, understood as human goods in a general sense. And you say that there's an inherent tension between a secular age and Christian faith, which goes beyond human flourishing in certain aspects. And I understand that as you're saying, that there's certain things in Christianity which a secular age simply can't digest, which is kind of sperrig in German, which doesn't fit in. So, and in other works you write about transcendence. Could you explain your concept of transcendence, and possibly also in the light of the relationship between nature and grace, and Karl Rahner's idea of the supernatural existential?
Exactly 5 minutes in which to do all of the above. So we're back to the panel, and we will not be reverting now to the audience for more questions. This is the final roundup. So just to warn you, it's the final roundup.
All right.
Best of luck to you with that then.
So, I mean, the responsibility of academics, well, I think in one way it's like the responsibility of just anybody in the church to speak up and give their view and so on. But if the academic happens to be in a field where they have some expertise, I mean, sociologists and so on, then they have a very special responsibility to bring this to bear. But we all share, whatever we are in the church, the responsibility of speaking up. I don't think that academics in general, have a kind of special role here, unless, as I say, they have some kind of expertise which is directly relevant to the missteps the church is making and so on. Now, the Weberian, I think the next question was I think that I'm not entirely sure that what you were articulating was the Weberian view, because I think that when you talk about what's the role of the economic change in bringing about secularization, what's the role of science and so on, you sound as though you're operating in a kind of monocausal, or you're looking for the single cause, right? And I think that can't be right for a big change like this. In other words, and you see again and again and again, that's the supposed correlations in history between this kind of economic development or social development on one hand. That's the supposed correlations in history between this kind of economic development or social development on one hand, and secularization in the sense of decline of faith on the other hand, just don't apply in different situations. Obviously, there is a very complex combination of causes operating here, where there are preconditions will make a difference. I mean, Gabriel Brosnet, the famous sociologist of France, called Paysan quitte la gare Montparnasse. When the peasant leaves the Montparnasse station, you go. Well, you come from a Catholic world which is entirely organized around the rural parish, right? And that being set up, then you can see how this piece of migration here from Brittany to Paris is going to have that kind of effect. But if there are very living Catholic in other circumstances, not. So, but the reason why I cavil at Weber, I don't see Weber as one of these sort of monocausal dupes, which I think that I see him as, not that I agree with everything, but I see him as being somebody who has much broader view. Now, I think that's very important what you say about the formative way of seeing people, and you can see this in modern politics too. I mean, when you think of, people talk about John Paul helping to bring down the wall by visiting Poland in '79. I think he gave them a sense of themselves as you can rise up, you can do this, you can be yourself. Or Tutu and Mandela, with the not entirely successful Truth and Reconciliation, a lot of people are still angry, but there was a way of saying to people, look, you can look to the future and how you're going to live together and make a certain sacrifice of your own desire to, have back at the people who did terrible things to you, and the Biko family, Steve Biko, I understand that. They couldn't do that. But lots of people were kind of challenged by this look to rise to another kind of level. And I think that is one of the great features of leadership in the contemporary world, Catholic or any other. And the question about democratic politics, I think that, you ask a Christian politician that they do the very best they can in their judgment, et cetera, et cetera. But if I had to add some quality to this, which would make somebody a much better politician because they would be following a certain Christian inspiration, it would be precisely this ability to think outside the box of the rule book and the institutions we're trying to as it were, bring about, and be able to see the points at which the institution building and the rules are crushing people, excluding people, making life very difficult for people, even if that put that him or him in kind of conflict with their party, which it might easily be, because people will say we have this program and you can't play around with it. And I think that would be rising to a higher level that as a political figure. Now, the very simple question I was asked at the end. Well, have we got till midnight, or but no,
3 minutes.
Let me try and give a stat.
Tell us all you know about Transcendence in 3 minutes.
And I think what we have is a very paradoxical situation when I talk about beyond flourishing. You see, because you could think the whole thing is the whole mission of God, Christ, is focused on human flourishing, real, full flourishing, right? But paradoxically, it involves this incredible total sacrifice, right? In the case of Christ, right? He dies that others may live. That's the element which goes beyond any kind of, ethos. Now, you can't. Secular age, as I'm defining secular, that is plural age, in which there are people of all kinds who are getting together in society and having to make decisions together, can't have that as its goal, as its general goal, see? But we, who are in it from some other particular point of view, can always have that in mind. And I think that is another way in which you could think of the role of a Christian politician. But there's something paradoxical. It's the same in something similar in Buddhism. I mean, the highest realization means going beyond the self, totally, right? And yet this also is seen as releasing this great wave of compassion, which turns towards the needs of people and the way that they're crushed. So there's something deeply paradoxical that can never be ironed out in terms of the post-enlightenment.
Thank you very much indeed. Is there anything, William, that you would have wished to add to that, or do you want to give the last word to Charles?
"25 things. Okay, one.
Well, I should be agapeic, or I should be kenotic and empty myself out and become nothing. I do think the question of teachers is very important, and there is a kind of intellectual pastorate, so to say. There's a pastoral dimension to being an intellectual. The forces at work in university organization at the moment are not conducive to fostering the openness to this deeper porosity in terms of the ultimate questions. So I think we have to, as thinkers, writers, study as comprehensively as we can, read as widely as we possibly can, think about the fundamental questions. Easier said than done. On the politicians, I did think of Nietzsche has a brilliant phrase. He talks about a Roman Caesar with the soul of Christ. I think myself that a Roman Caesar with the soul of Christ is an impossibility if the Roman Caesar remains the Roman Caesar. And I think we should pray for politicians and hope that they are not those who are the stony soil on which the seeds are thrown. Hopefully that they're fertile soil on which something flourishes.
That's a rather nice way to end. That was very well done. Thank you. Very nice. On your behalf, can I thank our wonderful two panelists? Can I thank William Desmond, and can I thank the star of these days, Charles Taylor? You've been an extraordinarily receptive, provocative, and patient audience, and it's been just a joy to be part of what has been a really very, very impressive 2 days of thinking. and speaking and also sharing with a great degree of generosity across many, many, many manifestly divergent viewpoints. So I hope you're going away with something special in your hearts. I'm not going to send you away myself, but there is somebody greater than I who is coming to send you away more happily than perhaps I have done. Joao, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed for this wonderful moderation, to Charles and to William for being here and being part of this exciting dialogue, exciting conversation. So thank you. We are going to close it the best way we can. I feel sad, but so is life. And I was thinking, particularly as Mary said, you brought this very difficult issue that I'm sure is an encouragement to all of us, because I think it's a very difficult topic. And I think it's something that that gives us the responsibility, but also the privilege of thinking through our condition as human beings and as Christians. I think we cannot do less than that. And this is what we did here so magnificently in these 2 days. And I think this is the lesson that we all need to take along as we move on here in the university and to all the different places, particularly knowing that people come from all over, from Australia to Russia to Ukraine to Italy to Macerata and so on and so forth, to Portugal. I'm going to say more about this just in a moment, but I think the kind of communion that we are able to build during these days is something extraordinary. But we didn't start it. The man who started it, the man who pushed it forward, the man who gave always, still, ever, the best of himself so that this culture of gift, this culture of love, of agape, this culture of porosity, of service, of kenosis is Father George McAlleese. So I'd like to invite you to just come here.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. All of the participants in this meeting. The participants come, I think, fully bundled, as the expression goes. We have a lot of professors here, but we also have a lot of fathers and mothers. And in fact, one of our speakers has 3 children and then adopted 3 disabled children. I think we have very complex circumstances, and so that's why I think we speak about now thinking from the ground up. We begin not with the Pope, although it would be fully worthy if we did, but we begin now with the families, and the families then to the teachers, and the teachers then to those who are working on special projects, and that then includes everybody in this room. I think we can go from there to the various dimensions of our civil life, and we're particularly honored to have with us today Mary McAlleese, ex-president of Ireland, to represent the political order. And the political order has been spoken of, I think, with great respect. and it will be more respected from the results of this afternoon's session and Mary's presentation. We have here in the room also representatives of a set of 16 teams who have been working on this issue of faith in a secular age. The secular age, evidently, is the title of the book of Professor Taylor. The teams that have been working on this, the 16 teams, they spread across, especially in North America and Europe, and hopefully will be followed by others from China during these following years, and from Africa and from Latin America. But we have people here from Peru, and we have people here from South Africa, and we have people here also from China. In fact, we can say that this meeting was put together by Hu Yeping, coming from China, continue on this. And so I've been asked by a number of people, is there a way of joining in? How can we continue this? This is the kind of work that needs to be done. And there is. If you write to the Council for Research in Values and Philosophy, Ms. Hu, whom you met at the registration desk, I believe, will answer to you. Perhaps it will have my name on it. It's Miss Hu. And when Miss Hu writes, it's over my name. So you're invited to draw together a professional team of scholars put together as you understand it. Do you need philosophers? Then philosophers there are, and theologians, and sociologists, and mothers and fathers of families all. You put the team together, you choose the theme, and you relate it, if you can, to the culture of your nation. And in that way, what you come up with will be something like those books that you found on the registration desk there. They are books that have been put together by these teams. And our hope is, above all, to be able to see that continuing in the future, not particularly by us, but perhaps philosophers and academicians can work in teams. Perhaps they can take account of the cultures of their people. Perhaps they can take up the themes that are crucial to the life of their nations. If so, we want to hear from you, and we look forward to what you can do in the future. So many, many thanks to all of you. And of course, I must not forget my alma mater, Gregorian University. 66 years ago, when I first came into the main hall. And I'm looking around today to see if I can find Miss Hu, and I don't see her in the hall. Here she is. So, Ms. Hu, could you stand for a moment and perhaps come down to the front here?
I just, Professor McAlleese asked me to say a few words. First, I want to say I'm not mafia because I have been wearing the sunglasses And also, I'm not a movie star. I try to hide myself and not to be cool because I lost my sunglasses on the plane. And this is the only glasses I have with the prescriptions. So I have to wear this 2 days. And also, I'm sorry for my voice. I lost it. And my voice back to China. And I'm also very privileged that to be here as a Chinese. And China has 1.4 billion people, but they say four persons, one Chinese. But in the whole hall, it's only me. So I'm very glad. And on behalf of this, I have a whole evening for me to speak. And so I would like to make an Oscar speech to thank all the list. First, I want to thank, on behalf of myself, to thank my mother, who made it possible for me to be here to provide a little service. And she didn't know what the truth is, but she taught me to be good and to do a little good things, and not to harm other people, and not to lie. And second, and not continue my Oscar speech, and the second, on behalf of myself, I would like to thank, in first time in public, to Professor McAlleese, whom I have been working for nearly 20 years. And over the 20 years, I have learned, I think this is the right place. And I think I have many hours till next day. I can speak as long as I want. And I learned not only the dialogic methodology to work with the peoples from scholars, especially from all over the world, and with different religions, background, but also the vision and the wisdom. And not only, over the 20 years, not only learned the kenotic spirit to serve, to help people, and especially in academic field all over the world, especially so-called developing countries, but also the gracefulness, non-selfishness, and also compassion, and above all, love. And so I would like to use this opportunity to thank him. And of course, and he continued to thank the people.
I think we all have our stories. I would like to tell a short story, and that is the trip here, coming to Rome this last week. We got to Munich, and Hu Yeping received word that her mother had passed away. So in between last Thursday and this meeting, Hu went back to China and buried her mother. And so we thank her deeply for the dedication that brought her back.